Hey folks, Steve the Math Buddha here, and today you're in for a real treat because today we're going to be looking at the probabilities behind the famous Monty Hall problem. Now, if you're not familiar with the problem, the Monty Hall problem is a probability question with a really controversial solution. And this controversy was revived recently on the Survivor television show when they brought this problem to life by way of their Survivor Do or Die twist. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be ending this controversy once and for all because I'm going to show you an explanation that is just plain irrefutable. Now, if you're already familiar with the Monty Hall problem and the controversy surrounding the solution, you could just skip ahead to my irrefutable explanation. Also, if you're tuning in just to see the results of last week's error challenge, you can find that in the last segment of this video. But I strongly suggest that you hang on and check out this video because this is a really fun problem, and I really think that you're going to appreciate this solution. And let's start by showing you exactly how the Monty Hall problem works and just why this controversy exists. The Monty Hall problem is based on the Let's Make a Deal television show, which was at one time hosted by the great Monty Hall. Now, the problem proposes a theoretic and recurring game where Monty chooses a random contestant from the audience and asks them to choose between three doors. Behind one of those doors is going to be a new car. Behind each of the other two doors is going to be a goat. And the way the game progresses is that the contestant chooses a door, at which point Monty shows some other door, always a loser, and then asks the contestant if they want to switch to the third door. And the big question is it to the player's advantage to switch? Now, most people are sure that it doesn't make any difference. It has to be 50-50. There's two doors. How could one door be worth more than any other door? But this is not the correct answer. The correct answer is that it is to the player's advantage to switch. And the explanation that's typically given is this. The probability that the contestant chose the correct door has to be 1/3, which means that the probability that the car is behind the only remaining door has to be 2/3. Now, the problem with that explanation is that it does not directly address the flaw in the reasoning that there are two equally likely possibilities. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you that there are actually three equally likely possibilities, and that what people are doing is taking two of those possibilities and jamming them together into one. But before we get to that, I would really like to address a super important assumption that is not always addressed when this problem is asked. And that's the assumption that the game is set to play out the same way every time. Monty will always show a losing door other than the one that's chosen by the contestant and then offer the contestant a chance to switch. It's built into the format of this fictitious Let's Make a Deal game. And even though it's a crucial point when it comes to calculating the probabilities, the point is not always stressed when the problem is asked, which is why I'm stressing it now. Also, just because the rule applies to some fictitious Let's Make a Deal game doesn't mean that it applies to the real-life Survivor Do or Die twist. But you know what? I gotta believe that it must. The Monty Hall problem is not a new problem. It's been around for a long time. And it seems pretty clear to me that the Survivor game is emulating the rules of that problem. It's not a coincidence that the Do or Die twist went down exactly the same way both times as the Monty Hall problem. It was designed that way. Now, if anybody disagrees with that or feels different, please let me know in the comments. But I have to believe that's true. So with that, let's move on to our explanation. Now, folks, if you're liking this video so far, please click that like button and please share on social media. And let's turn on those notifications. And please don't forget to subscribe. And by the way, I cannot say enough about the artist that created the design for this t-shirt. And I just purchased a new design from him. The guy is amazing. I didn't give him any detail for these designs. It came all out of his head. All I did was tell him it was for this channel. The rest of it came straight out of his imagination. I strongly suggest that if you need a design for anything, that you check this guy out. I have the link to his Fiverr page below, along with a link to the Zazzle site where I had this t-shirt printed. If you're going to buy anything at either one of those sites, I would really love it if you used my links because it really does help to keep this channel going. So let's move on to the solution to this problem. Let's assume, without loss of generality, that the contestant chooses door number 1. Now, why can we make that assumption? The reason we can make that assumption is because the answer to the ultimate question is it to the player's advantage to switch is not dependent on which door the player chooses. That's why we say without loss of generality, because we're examining a specific case, but at the same time, we're maintaining the general outcome. But by looking at a specific case, it really does simplify the outcomes that come from our three equally likely scenarios. So let's take a look at these three equally likely scenarios. The three scenarios are the car is behind door number 1, the car is behind door number 2, or the car is behind door number 3. Now I think we can agree that these are in fact three equally likely scenarios. And by the way, one day in the future, I am going to do a digital remake of this video where you actually see a door, a car, and a goat. Now I'm not anywhere near doing that yet, so I can't promise you you're going to see this next week or next month or even next year, but I promise you I will learn how to do it and I will get it done. With that being said, let's take a look at what happens under each one of these scenarios. Under scenario 1, Monty has a random choice. He could show either door 2 or door 3 because they both contain goats. So he shows one of those doors at random. If the player switches, they lose. So what happens under scenario 2? Well, under scenario 2, Monty has to show door number 3. He can't show door number 1 because the contestant chose that door, and he can't show door number 2 because the car is behind that door, so he must show door number 3. Now, some of you might be confused as to why I am making this assumption that Monty must show a losing door other than the one that's chosen by the contestant. Now, that's an assumption that I addressed in more detail in the previous segment, and you all might have missed it if you jumped right on to the explanation. So you might want to go back and take another look at that, especially if you're a Survivor fan, because in the previous segment, I discussed why I believe the rules of the Survivor Do or Die Twist game must emulate the rules of the Monty Hall problem. In the meantime, once we make that assumption, under scenario 2, it's pretty clear that Monty must show door number 3 and then give the contestant a chance to switch to the winning door, which is door number 2. If the player switches, they're going to win. Now, under scenario 3, more or less the same thing happened. Under this scenario, Monty must show what's behind door number 2 and offer the player a chance to switch to the winning door, door number 3. If the player switches, they're going to win. So it is to the player's advantage to switch. Probability of winning becomes 2/3. There's three equally likely scenarios, and under two of those scenarios, the player wins if they switch. So what's going on here? Let's take a closer look and see why this counterintuitive solution works. 2 out of 3 times, the car is going to be behind door number 2 or door number 3. So the player is going to want to switch, but to where? Well, Monty's going to show them. 2 out of 3 times, Monty actually eliminates the losing door and presents the contestant with the winning door. The remaining door becomes more valuable by virtue of the fact that it wasn't shown. It could have been shown, but it wasn't. Why not? Well, 2 out of 3 times, the reason it wasn't shown is because that's where the car was. You can't say the same thing about the contestant's door. The contestant's door does not become more valuable by virtue of the fact that it wasn't shown, because we know it's not going to be shown. It's in the rules. Now let's address for a second the typical intuitive response, which is that there are 2 equally likely possibilities. Where do those 2 equally likely possibilities fall in our chart here? Well, the 2 outcomes are these. The car is behind the contestant's door, or the car is behind the remaining door. As you can see here, outcome 2 is actually scenarios 2 and 3 together. Basically what's happening here, in the words of Christian Hubicki, one of the great Survivor characters of all time, the contestant is being given the option to switch to the better of the other 2 doors. Would you rather keep your own door or switch to the better of the other 2? So that's my explanation. Let me know in the comments. Did you like my explanation? Was it convincing? And please, let's try to keep the comments civil. If you disagree, let me know your thoughts. We can discuss it. Let me tell you, this problem created a lot of controversy on Facebook a couple of years ago when Survivor did the Do or Die Twist. You had a bunch of Survivor fans insisting that the probabilities are this, and then a bunch of other Survivor fans insisting that probabilities have to be that. And I got to tell you, the conversation wasn't always cordial. I would really appreciate it if we kept it cordial on my channel. If you want to be disrespectful to me, that's fine. I will accept all comments. I won't enjoy it, but I will respond as respectfully as I can. But I will not tolerate disrespect between viewers. I will delete those comments immediately, even if you're defending me. And trust me, that's going to happen. There are going to be viewers that attack me, that tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. And then there's going to be other viewers that rush to my defense. Well, you know what? If you're going to rush to my defense, that's awesome, but please defend me with logic and not with rudeness. Because if you defend me with rudeness, I will get rid of those comments. Even if they're being rude to me, they're still viewers, which means they're still supporting my channel. Now, if anybody disrespects you directly, I understand the need to disrespect them right back. But you know what? I'm just going to delete both comments. So maybe you should just let it go. Math is a way of communicating ideas with each other. It's not designed to separate us. It's designed to bring us together. And that's all I have for you today. This is the Math Buddha signing off. Have a great night and have a truly pleasant tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Monty Hall problem video. I really hope you liked it. Now, at the end of the last video, I left you with a little error challenge. There's some text on the whiteboard that's not actually on the whiteboard. I left it off the whiteboard when I was filming, and then I brought it in during the editing process. So the mistake that I made was I wrote the cost of cashews as $2.25 instead of $2.25 per pound. And I just could not live with that mistake. I did not want to go back and reshoot the entire thing. So what I did instead was I added in the text while I was editing. Check out here at 722. Note, we're talking about 3 straight lines and a backwards C. Now I tilted them and resized them so they looked off compared to each other. But if you look at each character separately, they are perfect. There's no way that I could have done that with a marker. Also, I had to move and resize the text every time I zoomed in and out on the whiteboard. Some of you might have noticed that at 8:57, check it out, it grew. It's much bigger than it was in the previous segment. So that's last week's challenge. This week, I have a new challenge for you. Find the continuity error. As I was splicing together the clips of this video, I noticed that I made a mistake when I was filming one of the clips. A mistake that led to a clear continuity error. Clear evidence that that particular scene had been shot out of sequence from the one that came before it and the one that came after it. Let me know in the comments what you see. And I'll be really curious because I shot this thing over 4 days, so there's probably a lot of continuity errors. But there's one in particular that I'm talking about that's really obvious if you see it. And I will reveal to you next week what I'm talking about when I drop my next video. Look for that a week from tonight. Thank you all for joining. This is the Math Buddha signing off again. May your path be free of all obstacles and littered with opportunity.